Empire of Light, new Searchlight Pictures film starring Olivia Colman from our good friend Sam Mendes. Lest we forget, not too long ago, right before the pandemic, he directed the Best Picture winner that wasn't 1917. Won
Hmm.
many a acting prize before being felled by Parasite before the world changed. Mendes is back with his buddy Roger Deakins. And who did he bring along for the show? Olivia Colman, one of the
Pretty good.
great living actors
I've heard
these
of her.
days on just an amazing run, as I think we all know at this point. You got Colin Firth in a supporting role, Toby Jones in a supporting role. Sounds like a notable film, obviously. The Sam Mendes follow up to 1917 with Olivia Colman speaks for itself. And this debuted at Telluride earlier this year, and it was not well received. And let me tell you, I did know that going in, but I was like, you got to have an open mind with the level of talent dispersed through this film. And I checked it out. It's in a limited release. And yeah, man, I think it's a movie that just really doesn't work. It had, I think, some well intentioned themes, but does not come together in the way it needed to, I think, to land, given, I think, the ambition the movie's trying to put on itself with its messaging. And just a bit of a bummer, honestly. I think Coleman is good in this, like she always is. I wouldn't, think it's like one of the best things she's ever done, though. And yeah, just ultimately a disappointment. But it's set in the 1980s in, I think, Kent, English coast in England. And we are at this movie theater, movie palace type place called the Empire, owned by Colin Firth. And Olivia Colman is one of the workers there. Toby Jones is the projectionist. And it's a movie that on one hand it's about like a love letter to cinema, the good old days, the movie palace, right? I think the issue with the movie though is like that's not all this is about. It has too many other things on its mind. um, and the least offensive thing about it is that it's a love for cinema of the past and whatnot. That stuff probably lands the best, but fortunately it's also a movie about um, struggling with mental health, uh, specifically regarding Olivia Colman's character, and you learn more about that as you watch the movie. And that I don't think is really handled in a deft enough way to really say much of anything about it, and kind of turned me off to the rest of the movie. And the other piece that doesn't really work is there's this like wayward romance story that really drives most of the movie. If anything, you would call this like a bit of a romance film because Michael Ward's character Steven comes in and he plays a younger man, and him and Olivia Colman's character Hillary kind of like hit it off, just talking about life and whatnot, and actually end up having a romance despite the differences in their age. And that I think is something where like it could have been a lot more effective, I think, if there wasn't this other like huge issue with like this movie's priorities. Um Steven is Michael Warren Steven like is black, and we are set in Margaret Thatcher's England, in the 80s, right? So like before we know it, the National Front is a story, and you see like skinheads in England and stuff, and it's like I got really annoyed when you have this scene where Hillary is basically revealed to be like an ignorant, aloof white woman, not really understanding how racism works in her country, in her community. And it's like a movie about it's like, oh, this young black man like showed her unfortunately showed her how racism affects him in his life, and thus she was able to see that and thus better her own personal self and overcome some of her demons and see the greater community in it all. And it's like I think there's just too much going on with this movie, and you're tackling a few like quite heavy themes that need, I think, a lot more care to really hit in the way you want them to hit, and it just really doesn't coalesce in the way it needs to. So I was just, I think, a bit annoyed with like the lack of sophistication with a lot of this stuff in the movie. And again, it's a big disappointment because it looks great. You have Deakins behind the camera, shocker. Coleman is still quite good, even if she plays a character with some fluctuations in her mannerisms. Obviously, as someone who is on the spectrum in some way. So yeah, Michael Ward was really great. Honestly, as Steven, I think he's probably most famous for being on Top Boy on Netflix. But yeah, I'd say ultimately it's a miss. It's just a bummer. That is so disappointing.
Yeah, that is disappointing, and I think even like just tough to like have them like you mentioned have the movie have this part where like a black person has to educate a white person about racism and like kind of like enlighten them. Like it's I don't know, a little frustrating. And potentially it's true to life back then. I don't know if people were all that oblivious, but yeah, it just doesn't that seems like a part I would probably not jive with either. Probably not a movie I'm gonna be seeking out, especially with so many good ones to catch up on.